Hello, fellow citizens, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm Elfie, just a girly pop trying to explore everywhere in the verse. And today, I'm going to take you on an adventure to Pyro 1. I would describe this expedition as slightly different than the rest of Pyro. There's not a breathable atmosphere, so we weren't able to totally slow it down and take a hike like we have been, but we were able to visit a few different outposts, and we even found a cave towards the end of our little trip. So, let's get into it. The first location we stopped at was Stag's Rut, and overall, the place is very blue. It's kind of settled in a valley with another elevator up at the top, but the first thing I noticed was that there was also a lot of ships abandoned. The second thing I noticed after I got out of the ship was that there were a ton of rocks with different structures and these plants that had purple leaves on them. This gave the planet a little bit of a different feel than all of the other places we've been in Pyro. The footsteps in the soil behind where I was walking was also another touch of detail that I really enjoyed and appreciated. The outpost itself was actually really small and not too much to write home about. There were some buildings that were very similar to the other outposts that we visited in Pyro, and they were a little bit more lively with NPCs in pretty much every building. But with the atmosphere being as harsh as it was, it didn't really make sense story-wise why there would be a man standing in an uncycled building. And as I ran around a little bit more outside, it became apparent that there were even more vehicles than I originally thought that were abandoned, and I couldn't quite figure out why they were abandoned here even after looking it up on the internet. This dome-like building that was actually cycled seemed to be the hotspot for all of the NPCs. A lot of them were mostly congregated in here, and it was also a really interesting building. There were a few different hidey holes, as well as another tunnel over here that I had found where you could actually walk through it. I'm curious if this will actually connect to any contracts in the future where you have to find things in these hidden places, but who knows? For now, it's kind of neat. But when I went back outside, this was actually the coolest thing that I found at any outpost in Pyro. There were actual plants in the greenhouse where you could pick the fruit off of them. I'm not too sure if these were specifically for Wicklow or anything, but this just kind of reminds me that I really hope they add more forage in the game, because I think that part of exploration would be really neat, finding different wild berries or picking up different things off the ground when you're out and about walking around on a planet. I think it would give a little bit more meaning to exploration. I checked out the rest of the buildings and there really wasn't anything interesting, but I did come across this loot box outside. And one of the things that I've enjoyed so far about the outposts at Pyro is actually the loot, but there wasn't too much at this one. So, on to the next. Coming out of Stag's Rut was pretty interesting. You could see the rocks for miles as well as all of the different valleys and hills. Something like this would be super cool to hike through the valleys, but due to the atmosphere, that wasn't feasible. I feel like this is a lot of space that really can't be used, and it would be interesting to see how planets without a breathable atmosphere will be utilized in the future, especially for things like base building. But for now, all we could do is just appreciate the beauty of it from up above. Grey Gardens Depot was really large and I was really excited to explore it, but unfortunately, a couple of my friends were definitely not friends with these guys, and so the shooting began pretty much immediately. And this happened both on the scouting trip as well as the main exploration trip that we did with a large group. But that's okay. We all headed back to the Phoenix on the big exploration, and we were off to Rustville. And I might have lied a little bit at the beginning of this video in the intro. We didn't ignore hiking altogether because we did have to make a little bit of a trek from the ship because we didn't want to get shot down due to other people's rep. But I did enjoy this walk for what it was. I really do like the aesthetics of Pyro 1, but by the end of about 5 minutes, we were all struggling with body temperature and we had to get into a cycled building pretty quickly. A few of us headed to the closest building that we saw, and thankfully it was a little bit cooler inside so we could regulate our body temperatures. When I first walked in, I noticed that there was a hole in the floor, and this is what leads to a basement area with some kinds of loot boxes. I've seen these before at other outposts, but there were quite a few people in the group who haven't been to outposts in Pyro, and so I was excited to show them these areas. However, things started to go sour a little bit quickly because some of us got stuck, and so we were able to help our friends out just a little bit. But as you can probably tell by now, there were some other gunfights that were starting because I guess the characters don't like when you pull out a gun and shoot your friends in their area. I'm not too familiar with how the mechanics work for how other people's rep in your party works when you go into these outposts, as well as what was actually the issue, if it was us shooting our friends, pulling out a gun, or something else that aggroed all of the NPCs. But by the time we got out of the basement, there was a lot of shooting going on. And even though I didn't want to lower my rip with anyone because I do like exploring every area in Pyro, I wasn't taking any chances with such a large group because we really didn't want to leave anyone behind or have anyone die. And although I didn't really get to see too much of the above ground of Rustville, I did get quite a bit of loot from that basement, and I have a feeling that a lot of the buildings were going to be similar to the other two outposts as well as some other outposts in Pyro, so I wasn't too upset about it. The only thing that I can think of is if the shop maybe has different items than some other places, I may take a trip back here solo. As much as I love the large exploration trips with a big group of people, I do think that the outposts are probably becoming more of a solo or very small group thing, especially with the varying reps that people can have. Regardless, I was still having a great time looking at the beautiful views outside of the Phoenix, and I was really excited to go to the next location, an abandoned outpost. Now, I didn't know that these types of locations existed, but if you look on something called Verse Guide, there's different off-the-grid locations that you can't jump to, but you can navigate to them using different coordinates. The outpost itself and the aesthetics were probably giving the space stations a good run for their money for the worst-looking place in the verse, but this was still a really awesome place to explore because there was so much to loot and a lot to actually see. There was an old greenhouse looking thing that I was trying to figure out how to get in, so I jumped through the side, and there actually turned out to be several loot boxes in here. There was also an area with half a structure of what could have been a building, and this was also a neat place to explore. There was also a tower that you could probably get to the top of if you had a ship to drop you off, but the ladders up to it were broken, so we weren't actually able to get up there. But the amount of loot that I was finding in this place was absolutely insane. I filled up my backpack and went back to load up the locker in the ship about 3 or 4 times. After a good 10 minutes, there were a few of us who were definitely pushing the limits of our body temperature, and with no functioning buildings that actually had regulated temperature, we needed to get back to the ship quickly so that we could lower our body temperature and get on to the next adventure. Yes, I did make it back to the ship just in time, and you can apparently survive at 40.4 degrees Celsius. I don't know how much more you can push it, but I wasn't willing to check that day. The next outpost that we stopped at was a Frontier Fighters outpost, and this was kind of nice, because yes, there were hostile NPCs, but rep didn't really matter, and it was shoot on sight. However, I'll give the Frontier Fighters credit. This main building was actually probably one of the nicest outpost buildings in Pyro that I've seen. It was very, very spacious, but again, it felt pretty empty because there weren't any friendly NPCs lying around and really no Frontier Fighters hanging out. Yes, we might have killed some in the doorway, but there should have definitely been more here, because this is definitely a gorgeous area that I would hang out if I lived here. All of the details, right down to the bedroom, the messy clothes, the tables, everything seemed pretty legit as far as what you would expect from an outpost bedroom, but overall, this was a really nice area to loot, hang around, and we ended up looting some of the bodies as well. There was also another basement here, which I think is becoming one of my favorite activities in Pyro, at least at the outposts. Looting basements, crawling around, I just like something about this. We were all getting ready to head out because it was getting pretty dark, but someone had called out that there was actually a cave right next to the site. And while we have some experience with cave mining, this was slightly different because there were some flares left here that were lit, and we weren't sure if this is something that would spawn automatically or if it was from some players. There was also a backpack sitting right at the entrance, so this could either be a matter of coincidence that there was another player, or there's some kind of lore of some lost explorer in this cave. The one nice thing about the cave being here, though, was that your body temperature could actually regulate because it was a stable condition down here. I didn't really strike any luck with the rocks, but I did find some of these things, so I was picking these, as well as all of the bugs that I needed to rescue from these caves. Overall, it was a great exploration. We rescued all the bugs and made them feel right at home, right in the Phoenix at the bar. However, I do want to come back at some point and see if there is some kind of different terrain or nature to explore. It'll have to be a low flyby, but I guess a little bit of exploration in a ship won't hurt me, especially after all the hiking I've been doing. If you'd like to join explorations like these, be sure to check out the Discord in the description down below. And if you like new player Star Citizen content where you get to see the verse through a new set of eyes, be sure to like and subscribe to support the channel. I post new videos twice a week, and I hope to see you next time. Until then, Elfie out.